What is up? All the pay-per-views of 2024 are now wrapped up. Every card, actually, is wrapped up. We don't have any UFC fights for like 3 more weeks. So I thought might as well I'd bring you guys a little end-of-the-year video, and I'm going to be ranking every UFC pay-per-view of this year from worst to first. This was an absolutely amazing year, generational year for the UFC. There were a bunch of great fights, but there were also some pretty lackluster pay-per-views, so I'm happy to be covering these guys for you. I'm super excited, and yeah, subscribe to the channel. Let's get into it. So, in dead last place, absolute shittiest card of the year, pay-per-view of the year, is UFC 301. This should be everyone's last place. This card sucked. There was nothing on this card. There was nothing fun on this card at all. That's kind of not true. Jose Aldo was fun to watch. Mauricio Ruffy was fun to watch. Miktek Oralby and Elvis Brenner was fun to see. This card really sucks, though. Like, I gotta reach into the early prelims to find some good fights on here. Vitor Petrino stuck his head into a guillotine against Anthony Smith. Steve Erceg got robbed. Michel Pereira kicked someone's face when they were on the ground. Did a backflip on him, actually. And then that's kind of all that happened, actually, on this. This card really sucked. So, yeah, dead last. I don't even know what place it is, but in last place, we got UFC 301. Next up, we have UFC 303 in the second to last place. And honestly, this was a very, very close battle with a few other fight cards. I couldn't really decide between the 3 of these at the bottom, but UFC 303 sucked, man. There was absolutely nothing good on it, if we're going to be honest, besides Pereira and Prohaska too. Thank God Dan Ige stepped up, because if he didn't and we couldn't see Diego Lopez either, this card would have been below 301. Anthony Smith was on it again, except for he looked so atrocious against Roman Dolidze. I mean, Roman Dolidze? Really, Anthony? And then after his fight with Roman Dolidze, he goes on the Believe You Me podcast, and he's like, I mean, I think this kind of closes the gap on beating Alex Pereira. Really, you think? After losing to Roman Dolidze? You got 3-0'd by Roman Dolidze. Roman Dolidze dominated Anthony Smith, yeah. But what else was on this card? There was literally nothing on this card. Oh my gosh. It was fun to see Peyton Talbot get a KO. That was cool. Ray Tsuruya. I know he hasn't really fought since this fight card, but he's a great prospect that you want to look out for. But besides that, there's basically nothing on this card, and it gets my spot for second to last. Next up, rounding out the bottom 3, our third to last place, the bronze medal for the shittiest card, is UFC 304. UFC 304 was another nothing card. The worst main event of the entire year, by far. Terrible main event. Every Leon Edwards fight sucks. Every Bilal Muhammad fight sucks. It sucked, right? And it sucked to see Bilal get the belt as well, right? Aspinall, it was fun to see, but like, why do we even got this guy defending an interim belt? Why is this guy even doing this, you know? So I guess that was cool. Seeing Paddy Pimblett choke out Bobby Green was probably the best fight on this card. Arnold Allen had a pretty good fight with Giga Chikadze. I really liked that one. I like to see Arnold Allen get a win. Muhammad Mokaev and Manel Kape gave us the most underwhelming, disappointing worst fight of the year. If there was a worst fight of the year, it would probably go to this one. I mean, the amount of hype that was behind this fight that it did not live up to was insane. You're literally sucker punching this guy not even 24 hours before the fight happens, and now you are putting on the worst fight ever if you're Muhammad Mokaev. I couldn't even believe how Muhammad Mokaev performed. He won. He shouldn't have. They should have taken a point for him pulling down Manel Kape's shorts. Paddy Pimblett, it was cool for him to show how actually dominant his offensive jiu-jitsu is. It's very good. His offensive jiu-jitsu is very good. His striking's still poor, and his wrestling is mediocre at best. The only reason why it even went to the ground was because Bobby Green shot a takedown and Paddy Pimblett pulled guillotine. I don't know why you're shooting for a takedown if you're Bobby Green. Kind of ruins the excitement on the fight very much. Like, what are you even doing? The Tom Aspinall fight was cool, but it's like we already knew this was going to happen, and why is Tom Aspinall even defending his belt? An interim belt, he's defending it. What are we doing here, UFC? What are we doing? The Bilal Muhammad fight sucked because because why does Bilal have to be a champion? Why does he just ruins the sport, man? These guys like Bilal Muhammad and Merab Dvalishvili and soon to be Umar Nurmagomedov, that just ruins this frickin' sport, dude. They really do. They just ruin the sport, and it makes me, I don't know. There's a lot of things I could say about it, but I'm not going to say it all right now. Third to last place, rounding out the bottom three, we got UFC 304. Moving on to the 11th place, I think it's 11th. It's 11th. It's got to be 11th. We got UFC 302. This fight card is completely carried by the main event. Outside of the main event, it's weak. The Kevin Holland fight ended in a very disappointing fashion because there was no tap even on the armbar. But Herm Dean still stepped in. His Michael Okunjacek's arm didn't really break, so that was kind of a weird one. So that was a sucky ending, right? Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa was an awful fight. That was not only Paulo Costa's fault. People, stop saying that the fight being boring is completely Paulo Costa's fault. Sean Strickland could have pushed the pace more, and when he did, he had Paulo Costa in some serious trouble. Dropped him at the end of the fifth. Had Paulo Costa scared, terrified out there. He wouldn't push the pace. He would not push the pace. Sean Strickland really made this fight card underwhelming. And besides that, it was kind of just a big nothing card with a bunch of nothing that happened all over the card, right? But the main event is one of the best main events of the year. Besides that, it's the worst card of the year. Outside of the main event, it's the worst card of the year, in my opinion. But Makhachev and Dustin Poirier, Islam Makhachev taking on Dustin Poirier, amazing fight, completely carries this whole card. It was an absolute war. Poirier did tap at the end of the fifth, but it was a great Darce choke, great takedown, great setup by Islam, super, super high-level MMA. Dustin Poirier looked great. Islam looked great. You know what it is. All right, so in the 11th spot, we got UFC 302. First card that is making the way into Jackson Holpuck's top 10, we got UFC 306 at the Sphere. This fight card, man, it's a weird one. It's a weird one, all right? Because on paper, this is the worst card of the year, right? Terrible fights on paper, right? Boring co-main event with Valentina Shevchenko laying on top of Alexa Grasso for 25 minutes. Sean O'Malley loses his belt in a terrible, terrible fashion. We got Merab as champ. What's so great about this card? Bro. Joshua Van Edgar Charas. Amazing war. Raul Rosas versus Erkaleg. Amazing war. Estevan Ribovic versus Daniel Zellhuber. Damn near fight of the year. Ronaldo Rodriguez versus Ode Osborne. Another damn near fight of the year. Yes, I know it's a bunch of no-names. I know it's a bunch of randoms at the Sphere. I know O'Malley lost his belt. I know the co-main sucked. There were some absolute wars on this fight card that were unlike any other fight card. It was it was a beautiful, beautiful scenery, right? Beautiful look to the card. Great effects on the Sphere. The Sphere was great, right? Lived up to all the expectations, in my opinion. I thought this fight card was, on paper, very mediocre, right? But I do think that it's better than some people give it credit for. So, at the number 10 spot, we got UFC 306 at the Sphere. Moving on to the number 9 spot, I settled on UFC 309, Jones versus Miocic. Listen, there were a lot more positives to this card than there is for any other pay-per-views so far. Oliveira versus Chandler, great fight. Stipe versus John Jones, fun fight. Oban Elliott, great KO. Rahiz Brahimaj, great KO. Good to see Jim Miller get a win and also take no damage. right? Marcus McGee had a good win over Jonathan Martinez. There are some great fights on here, okay? But also, Stipe looked terrible, right? Made the win look not very impressive. Marcus McGee and Jonathan Martinez wasn't very entertaining. Joanna Diniz got stopped by the doctor when it probably shouldn't have been, right? Card's not great. The card is not great, but it is good enough to make it in at the number 9 spot for me. Kind of a boring card, but there were some good fights on there. There were some fun KOs. Oliveira versus Chandler was a great fight, even though Chandler's a cheater. Michael Chandler, you are a cheater, right? I hope they give you Dan Hooker, and then Dan Hooker sleeps you. And then I hope they give you Tony Ferguson, and then Tony Ferguson sleeps you. So then you have no real wins on your record. And I hope all the wins that you have get avenged by that fighter. I hope the UFC cuts Michael Chandler from the UFC. He deserves it. He's probably juicing. I mean, look at that physique, right? He's cheating, and every fight he has, he cheats, man. Every fight. Listen, that's a topic for a different video, but Michael Chandler is a cheater, and this fight card is at my number 9 spot. Now, coming in at the number 8 spot, we got UFC 310, Pantoja versus Asakura. There were some good fights on here. I really liked the main event. I thought Gane versus Volkov was a good fight. It just sucks it was a robbery. I think Bryce Mitchell knocking out Kron Gracie was really cool. Okay? I do think that, the Anthony Smith fight was fun, right? But Gane versus Volkov, bad robbery. Co-main event, Shavkat versus Ian Gary. Terrible fight. Terrible fight. That fight had so much hype behind it, and it was an awful, awful fight. I made a whole video on it, and the fight still sucked. So, even though there were some good fights on here, there were some very, very bad ones, and the co-main event sucked so bad. The feature fight on the main card was a robbery, so I just can't give this fight card that much credit. So I am putting UFC 310 at my number 8 spot. Coming in at number 7, we have UFC 297 in January of 2024. It opened up the year, and there were some seriously great fights on this card. It was fun seeing Chris Curtis get a win. That was a fun fight with Marc-Andre Barrieux. The Sean Strickland fight in the main event with Drix du Plessis, that was really fun. Even though Sean did get robbed bad, that does suck. The one thing holding it back is the co-main was really, really weak. I don't really care about Mayra Bueno Silva or Raquel Pennington at all. It was fun seeing Charles Jourdain. He's a big name. I love watching him fight. Jimmy Fleck was on the early prelims, and he put on a show against Malcolm Gordon. That was a really fun comeback victory. But overall, this fight card's not too strong, but I do still think that it's a lot better than the other one, so it is going to go in at my number 7 spot. Coming in at the number 6 spot, we got UFC 307 in October. It was Pereira and Roundtree in the main event, of course, putting on a great fight. That carried this card basically as far as it is. The rest of this card, pretty mediocre. Co-main event, nothing. Raquel Pennington, Juliana Pena, actually pretty entertaining. Raquel Pennington knocked down Juliana Pena and still lost. How do you knock down your opponent in a WMMA match and still lose the decision? Crazy. Jose Aldo got robbed. The judges tonight were terrible. They robbed Raquel Pennington. They robbed Jose Aldo. It was bad. All right, Roman Dolidze and Kevin Holland was fun while it lasted. Kayla Harrison actually got tested. I thought that was cool. Besides that, the judges were terrible. Mario Bautista ruined the fight with Jose Aldo completely. Completely ruined it. That fight could have been so awesome. It was so awesome, too. If Jose Aldo got his hand raised, it would have been a great fight, but because they robbed him, it really just taints this whole fight card. And then, there were some other good fights on there, but besides that, it was pretty boring. It was pretty lackluster. I think the main event carried it super, super far. It was a great main event. Roundtree looked really, really good. Pereira just eventually caught on to him. Roundtree gassed out. It was a great fight. It really was. Loved this. I really enjoyed this card, but it's just not good enough for my top 5, so UFC 307 goes right in at the number 6 spot. Moving on to the top 5, we have the actual really, really good fight cards of this year, the very, very good pay-per-views. We got UFC 305. All right, Izzy and Drickus in the main event, great fight. Kai France, amazing KO over Steve Erceg in the co-main event. Dan Hooker put on an absolute war with Mateusz Gamrot. Jairzinho Rosenstruck put on a striking showcase for heavyweight against Tai Tuivasa. This fight card was great. There are a few downsides I have to it, though. The Junior Tafa fight sucked. I do think that Junior Tafa would have completely flatlined Walter Walker if he had the chance, but the ref stepped in when he shouldn't have on the knee bar that Junior Tafa never even tapped to and still got robbed of. And besides that, can't believe a judge gave a fight to Tai Tuivasa, especially 30-27. How can you give that to Tai Tuivasa? It sucks that Kai France won. I hate Kai France, and I wish Steve Erceg could have got it done. Besides that, the fight card was great. Fights were great. It's just not as good as some of these other generational cards of this year, but UFC 305 makes the top 5 of my list. Great fight card. Next up, going into the top 4, I just want to say all 4 of these spots were a super, super tough decision for me. All 4 of these pay-per-views are some of the 4 best cards we've seen in a very long time, and my number 4 spot is UFC 299, Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera. And why did I choose this one below all the rest of them, as in 298, 308, and 300? And honestly, it just comes down to the little things. I think Jailton Almeida and Curtis Blades was a terrible fight, and it ended in a really lackluster way because Curtis Blades was getting dominated, and then he kind of just squished his belly on Almeida's head, and then he was stuck and then just got TKO'd. It was stupid, right? I think that's kind of it on this card. I mean, it was a great fight all around. I think Michael Page and Kevin Holland could have been more exciting. Besides that, though, great card. O'Malley and Chito Vera, that was very one-sided, I will say. We kind of all knew what was going to happen in that fight. But yeah, besides that, great co-main. Great main event, honestly. Super entertaining main event. It was fun to see MVP's debut. I wish we got to see Cody Garbrandt on this card, but we didn't. Besides that, though, great card, and it's a really nice fit for my number 4 spot. Getting the bronze medal for the number 3 best pay-per-view of the year is UFC 298. All right, great main event. Ilia Topuria and Alexander Volkanovski, great fight. All right, Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Lemos, great fight. Right, Junior Tafa getting a great KO. Okay, or no, Marcus Rogerio de Lima getting a great KO over Junior Tafa. Okay, Rinya Nakamura having a real dominant performance. Okay, there were some great fights on this card. Paulo Costa and Robert Whittaker, absolute war, great fight. Okay, the only thing that's holding this back behind 308 and 300 is Ian Gary and Jeff Neal. A pay-per-view feature fight. The third to last fight on the card, and it was terrible. It was terrible. That is the only fight that is holding this fight card back from being the best card in the year. Best card of the year, honestly. I feel like it would have been if it wasn't Ian Gary and Jeff Neal. Such a lazy, boring fight, man. It sucked, but that's just what Ian Gary likes to do. Likes to put on terrible fights. So every time his name's on a pay-per-view slot, it just makes me mad because I know the fight card's going to suck, or the fight is going to suck that he's in. Okay? So yeah, my number 3 spot, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Topuria. So that goes at my number 3. Coming in at the number 2 spot, we have UFC 300, Pereira versus Hill. And great fight, top to bottom, amazing card, 10 out of 10 card, honestly. Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, awesome fight. Zhang Wei Li, great performance, right? Justin Gaethje, Max Holloway, fight of the year. Not actually, in my opinion, but it was a great fight. Arman and Oliveira, fun fight, right? Brandon and Bo Nickel. It was fun to see Cody Garbrandt and Davison Figueiredo on there. Andrade, fun to see Andrade get a win. But my one problem with this card, that's compared to UFC 308, which is, in my opinion, the best card of the year. Why do we got Cody Brundage and Bo Nickel on a main card? Why do we have women? Okay, I'm sorry to say it, WMMA Why are we having WMMA fights on the main card of the best fight card of the year? Best fight card of the year, you got WMMA fights on there? It's not. Especially with Zhang Weili, because Zhang Weili's performances are just so dominant every time. I don't even care to see him, you know? So that's really the only reason why UFC 300 is below UFC 308, but it's still a great fight card, amazing fight card, legendary fight card, all right? And if it wasn't for UFC 308, this would be the best fight card of most years, right? But it falls second on my list for this year just because of the fight card that's in front. And finally, we have the best card of the entire year, or the best pay-per-view card of the entire year, and it's UFC 308 Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. All right, we have an amazing main event, amazing co-main event, amazing feature fight. Magomed Ankalaev put on a great performance. All right, Lerone Murphy versus Danny Ige, great technical fight. Okay, we got Holloway versus Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria, great knockout in the main event. Okay, and we got Shara Magomedov's double spinning back fist KO and Hamzat Chimaev's mauling of Robert Whittaker. This fight card is absolutely amazing. There's nothing else that I need to say. It's an absolute 10 out of 10 from top to bottom, perfect card. And yeah, in my opinion, it's the best fight card of the whole year. With anything that you agreed with or disagreed with on my list, make sure to let me know. Subscribe to the video. And yeah, if you guys want me to do any more end of the year videos, you know, leave them in the comments. All right, who's with me?